I'm Michael Fox, and this is the Prospector News Podcast. And I'm joined today by Greg Hahn, the Vice President of Exploration for Arizona Silver Exploration. Welcome, Greg.
Thanks, Michael. Pleasure to be here.
For my listeners who aren't familiar with the company, let's start out by giving them the 10,000-foot view of who Arizona Silver Exploration is.
Sure. Well, Arizona Silver Exploration is a relatively new company. We started the company in 2017 with the objective of exploring Arizona for mostly silver, but also looking for gold, thinking that Arizona is underexplored for precious metals. It's well known as the copper capital of North America, but it's overshadowed by Nevada for gold and Mexico for silver, yet it's sandwiched directly between those two major producing precious metal districts. So we thought Arizona was ripe for exploration. So we started the company, as I said, in 2017. We picked up a few properties and started drilling them in 2017, but my eye was always on what I call the Philadelphia property. It was known historically as the Arabian Mine, and it was mined from early 1900s or late 1890s through to about the beginning of World War II. And it was produced gold from four levels along about a 400-foot or 150-meter strike length down to about similar depth. And average grade was somewhere around 0.6 of an ounce. We know that the operating costs were about $8 a ton. Gold was $20 a ton at the time, and they produced at an average grade of $12 a ton. So that comes out to about a 0.6 ounce per ton average grade, which led me to believe that they probably left a lot of material behind that was less than 0.6 or less than 0.4 ounces per ton, which was their cutoff. So one critical part of the history there was that at the time I first looked at this property in the 80s when I was with Noranda, there was a state highway that ran right down the middle of the property, which made it very difficult to envision how you could develop the property. But around 2000, the state rerouted the state highway around the property, and that made the former state highway actually a private drive right down the middle of the property. And that was attractive to me. So I went to contact the owner and got in a discussion regarding leasing his private patented claims, and he was not very amenable to it, but we were able to acquire the unpatented claims, which were around him in 2019, and we started drilling the property in 2019. Right out of the chutes, we hit some very attractive high grade, and what it demonstrated to us was that the grade was increasing towards his patented claim and decreasing away from his patented claim. Well, it took, I'll bet, a year and a half, almost 2 years, maybe even 2 years, to get to know the landowner, have him get to know us, and negotiate a deal with him. And his first proposal was, well, I'll lease you a third of the property, and let's see how that goes. And I was attracted enough to the property that I was confident enough we could ultimately pull this off, that I said, okay, that's a deal. So we leased the southern third of the property, which actually was 1.5 kilometers away from where we had last drilled. And we went down to the southern end of the property and we drilled 9 reverse circulation holes where we had access. It has good access in places and no access in other places. And all 9 holes hit. In fact, they hit so well that the landowner, who was a miner by trade himself, came up and panned the reject cuttings coming off the reverse circulation splitter. And he found better gold in the reverse circulation reject cuttings than he was used to getting on his property. So he got very excited and decided, well, why don't you lease the rest of it from me as well, which we immediately did. And that would have been the fall of 2021. So there you go. There's the 2 years it took us to negotiate that deal and drill some holes there. And since then, we have been drilling progressively along strike of those intercepts and have encountered mineralization in every hole we've drilled to date. So that's in a nutshell, from a high level, kind of how we've gotten to where we are. And we put some material on the website, which should help investors kind of navigate through the history of the property. But most recently, we just put a three-dimensional rotating drill hole model on the web, which demonstrates where we've drilled, what we've intercepted, where we haven't drilled, which is sort of in the middle of areas we've already drilled and had good intercepts, and what we need to do to flesh out the remainder of the drilling in order to be able to calculate how much we have in terms of a resource.
Perfect. I was going to ask about that because it always seemed to me that the Philadelphia project was split into two. There was the original stuff that you were doing on the north end of the project, and then there's the newer drills that were coming from the south end. And now I have the explanation as to why it was being done that way. It was because of the current landholder of the project. But what this has done is it's kind of created a gap between those two sets of drills. And it's my understanding moving forward, you're trying to drill that gap in order to bring everything together. So tell me about the gap between these two drilled areas.
Sure. Well, we have a few gaps, but the one that we referred to as the gap was really focused at the south end of the property, which was between the two fences of holes or three fences of holes that we drilled at the south end of the property. We didn't have access into this gap area, so we weren't able to really drill it until we could get a road, a really rough road, crude pioneer road up to the top. And we were able to do that this past winter. So this spring, we drilled, I believe it was 9 holes up on maybe it was 8 holes up on that drill pad, which was sort of in the middle of the gap. And all of those holes hit the mineralization, which is characterized by a high-grade vein in the hanging wall, stockwork in the middle, and then a low to high-grade vein at the bottom. It depends on where you are, whether the lower vein has high grade or just average grade. But that's sort of like a sandwich. We have 2 veins on either end and then a stockwork zone in between, which on average is running about 50 meters thick. So we were successful in encountering that in all of the drill holes in the gap. So we're starting to fill the gap. We didn't drill enough holes to fully plug the gap, but it indicates that mineralization is continuous through that area. Now we just have to drill out the remainder of the gap in order to quantify what's there. We have another gap which we're working towards, and that's to the north. As I said, we leapfrogged from the northern property boundary to the southern property boundary because that's what we were allowed lease access to. And now we're working our way northward back towards the original north lease boundary. And we have a zone, it's called the Resaca zone because it's on the Resaca patented claim. It's about 1,500 feet long or 450 meters long. Has good gold geochemistry, good stockwork, quartz veining. We have one hole at the north end that is, I think it's 3 to 4 meters of 11.5 grams, and we have another hole at the south end that's only 1.5 meters, but 24 grams in the footwall vein, and with stockwork carrying over through the top of it. So we're looking forward to drilling that entire unexplored strike length currently, and that's highlighted in that 3D video. That's on our website. You can see how pretty representative it is of the mineralization on both sides of it.
So if I'm understanding the theory correct, then is that the belief is that the mineral structure continues from the north through to the south portion where it's been drilled, and that the drilling that you're doing in the gap is going to prove that mineralization is continuous through the property. Is that correct?
That is correct. We can demonstrate that on the surface by surface mapping and surface geochemistry, but there aren't any drill holes in those gaps for us to be able to do that from a resource perspective. So we have to finish drilling those holes in order to quantify the resource that's therein. And I should point out that the mineralization continues to the south beyond the patented claims that we've leased. There's a shaft right at the southern property boundary that reportedly ran $10 per ton back in the 1920s. Well, gold was $20 a ton, so that means it runs half an ounce. And we don't have any drill holes south of that patented boundary yet either. So we have an open strike length for really another 1.5 to 2 kilometers south of the patented boundary. So all in all, we have a mineral system here that's about 4.5 kilometers long Very good surface expression, strong geochemistry with very few drill holes in it. So it's pretty exciting because this is truly a grassroots type of discovery. Yes, there was historic production from a very small area back in the early part of the 20th century, but from a modern mineral deposit perspective, it's pretty much a grassroots discovery.
That's great. So going forward this summer, what is the drill plans in the gap or for the property in general, I guess?
We have a 14,000 foot or was that about a 4,000 meter drilling program planned. We're probably not going to drill in the summertime because it's approaching 110 to 100. It gets up to over 120 degrees there in the Fahrenheit in the summertime. That's 45 to 48 or 49 degrees Celsius. So it gets a little hot. And although we could do it, the drillers don't like to do it. And most of the drillers get out of Arizona in the summertime. They go to Alaska. One of our contractors has gone to Alaska. Another one is up in Idaho and Montana. And they say, well, we'll come back in the fall when it's cooler. So we may be able to drill this summer. It depends on a combination of factors. We have permits to drill. That's not an issue. Patented ground is very easy to drill off of. It's very easy to develop. We have a permit underway with the U.S. Bureau of Land Management on BLM ground. We had to do an environmental assessment on that proposed drilling. That draft environmental assessment has been submitted to the BLM earlier this week. They are reviewing it. They will provide comments and suggestions for finalization, and we'll finalize it probably during the next 2 to 3 weeks. Maybe by the end of July will be finalized, and then hopefully they'll issue their record of decision and finding of no significant impact, so that we'd be in a position to drill that come September when drill rigs return to the Arizona area.
So what you're saying, ultimately, it's a myth that it's a dry heat, so it doesn't matter.
It's a dry heat, but it does matter when it gets up there. I mean, we lose hikers every summer who come out here and think it's no big deal to go hiking in the sunshine at 110 degrees Fahrenheit, and they don't take enough water, and they don't make it.
No, they don't. So with the drill plans that's coming for the fall, how many holes is represented by that 4,000 meters?
It's roughly 30 holes, 3 holes per section along 10 sections. So, they're not very deep holes, which is one of the beauties of this system is it outcrops. So we get mineralization from 30 meters on down. And one of the curiosities or peculiarities of epithermal systems is they can, when they form, they stop very quickly as they're rising through the lithologic column. So we'll have surface expression that's geochemically strong, but it doesn't really look that great from a visual perspective. And we drill 30, 40, 50 meters below it, and we get these nice wide mineralized intercepts of 1 gram plus for the bulk mining and 10 grams plus for the high grade. That's not present on the surface. So you don't have to see this stuff on the surface to have confidence there's something down there. As long as you have good geochemistry and the quartz veining is there, it's strong enough indication that you're very close. So we think we'll get good mineralization for those 3 holes. They'll span about 100 to 150 meters of dip along, like I said, 450 meters of strike. And that's a lot of ground to cover and with only 4,000 meters of drilling. So it's very efficient drilling.
I appreciate that you can't speak specifically about, potential drill results, but the question I have is, how will you know that the fall drill campaign has been a success? What broad questions will be answered by that?
Well, visually, we can tell whether we've hit the mineral system or not. We also can the reject cuttings. There's visible gold in the system. It's fine, but it's visible, and you can pan it. And I think we have a shot on the website that shows some of the panned gold that we get off the drill rig. So we will know visually if we've hit the system. Stock works on 50 meters wide or 40, 50, 60. Sometimes it's 110 meters wide, 115 meters wide. We'll know if we've hit the mineral system itself. And we're pretty confident we'll do that because we can see it at the surface. we'll pan the cuttings to know whether we're getting visible gold in the cuttings. That's generally an excellent sign that we've hit something in the plus 5 to 25 gram per ton range. And then it's just a matter of waiting for the assays to come back to actually quantify what we've hit.
Anything else you want to tell us about the Philadelphia project today?
One thing that we've had a number of people look at it, and some people still looking at it. One of the things that they like about it, it is very clean material. It has very low arsenic, very low antimony, very low mercury, if any. Doesn't have any base metals in it, so it is a metallurgically ideal ore type. We've done some metallurgy on it ourselves, and we get extractions, gold extractions in the 94 to 98% range. Historically, the Arabian mine shipped their ore to what was at the time the Catherine cyanidation mill along the river, and they got 94% extraction. So we get very good recoveries. This is not a refractory ore. There's no sulfides. There's no orpiment, realgar, arsenic, antimony, mercury, any of the nasty things that accompany some epithermal gold veins. This is a clean quartz calcite vein that is very desirable metallurgically.
Wonderful. For the investors out there, I will be putting the contact information for the company at the bottom of the description of this podcast. Please feel free to reach out to Mike Stark, the CEO, with any questions that you might have. Greg, it's been a pleasure having you on, and I look forward to having you back in the fall after the drill program is complete and get an update on the progress.
Happy to do that. Thanks very much for having me on.
Thank you. Arizona Silver Exploration is a paid sponsor of the Prospector News. The host owns shares and warrants in the company bought at the market for investment purposes. The Prospector News podcast is for educational purposes only. The opinions expressed are those of the participants and are not to be taken as investment advice. Listeners need to do their own due diligence and seek advice of a licensed investment advisor.